A call to, quote, make history on what Joe Biden refers to as the central cause of his presidency, defending our democracy. Just moments ago, speaking in Arizona at the announcement of a library dedicated to his friend and the late Senator John McCain, the president described a battle for the future of our country against a movement led by the former president, facing criminal charges for trying to overturn an election while also running for the White House for a third time.
And there's something dangerous happening in America now. There's an extremist movement that does not share the basic beliefs in our democracy. The MAGA movement. Not every Republican, not even a majority of Republicans adhere to the MAGA extremist ideology. I know because I've been able to work with Republicans my whole career. But there's no question that today's Republican Party is driven and intimidated by MAGA Republican extremists. Their extreme agenda, if carried out, would fundamentally alter the institutions of American democracy as we know it. My friends, they're not hiding their attacks. They're openly promoting them, attacking the free press as the enemy of the people, attacking the rule of law as an impediment, fomenting voter suppression and election subversion. Did you ever think we'd be having debates at your stage of your careers where banning books and burying history? Trump says the Constitution gave him, quote, the right to do whatever he wants as president, end of quote. I've never heard a president say that in jest.
The president also warning that Donald Trump would take a wrecking ball to the functioning of our government and to the Constitution if reelected.
Seizing power, concentrating power, attempting to abuse power, purging and packing key institutions, spewing conspiracy theories, spreading lies for profit and power to divide America in every way, inciting violence against those who risk their lives to keep America safe, weaponizing against the very soul of who we are as Americans. This MAGA threat is a threat to the brick and mortar of our democratic institutions. But it's also a threat to the character of our nation.
The president also taking on some of the most dangerous and inflammatory rhetoric coming from Donald Trump in just the last few days, including attacks against this network and NBC News, and, of course, his claim that our country's top military official, the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, should be executed for treason. It is just the latest in what has become a years-long pattern of attacks on the military and on our veterans, going back to when Trump slammed McCain's valor. Here's what the president had to say about Trump's attacks on Milley.
This is the United States of America. And although I don't believe even a majority of Republicans think that, the silence is deafening.
Joining us now, co-founder and executive director at Protect Democracy, Ian Bassin, political strategist Matt Dowd, and with me here at the table for the hour, New York Times editorial board member Mara Gay. Ian, I'll start with you. You run a democracy watchdog group. Your reaction to the president's comments today in light of what we have been hearing from the former president over the past several days?
Well, thanks for having me. I think the speech was incredibly important. There's two things that I think the president said that I want to call attention to that were especially important. And one is that democracy and the protection of it is the defining issue of our time and is the defining issue of the election. And that's because everything else flows from it. Whether you believe in high taxes or low taxes, whether you believe in more regulation or more open markets, whether you believe in gun safety and gun control or the Second Amendment, the disagreement over those issues is what America and democracy is all about, that we can argue over them, we can debate them, we can vote on them, people can win, enact them, and then they can lose, and someone else can win the next time. But if you don't have democracy, you can't have those arguments, and you can't have them peacefully. And Donald Trump and his MAGA movement are attempting to eliminate our ability to maintain that set of free choices. And I think making clear that that's why protection of democracy is the most important thing was central to what the president is saying, and everyone needs to understand it for next year. The other thing that I think was really important the president said is that this is not a partisan issue. There are progressives, moderates, and conservatives who are united, a vast majority of them, on the protection of democracy. There are Democratic and Republican voters who all want to protect our democracy. We have an extremist faction led by Donald Trump that has captured the elected apparatus of the Republican Party, but it is a minority in this country, and the vast majority of us, from left to right, who want to preserve what the founders gave us, have to unite together in defense of our democracy.
Yeah, and to that point, Matt, that is what the president tried to crystallize in his speech, that the majority of this country still believes in democracy. And perhaps the most stark image that we have all seen, January 6th, the insurrection, the attack on the Capitol, the president using that as a motivating factor to remind Americans of what is at stake, both physically and metaphorically. But do you think speeches like this go some way towards repairing the damage of what we saw on January the 6th? Do you feel that Americans are actually responding to the threat that was outlined by the president in his speech?
Well, I'm going to build on what Ian talked about. I think speeches like this inspire us to protect democracy, because it's ultimately not up to Joe Biden. It's ultimately up to all of us to protect democracy and protect our Constitution through the elections that we will have and holding our politicians accountable. I hope that the president this is not just a singular speech, that this basically is the launch for what 2024 is about. I say that both as an American who believes in democracy, but also as somebody that can see political strategy. The best political strategy in winning campaigns in 2022 were the ones that made democracy their center of their campaign. I think the president and his campaign has discovered that running this as a referendum on Bidenomics, you can argue over the facts of it and all of that, but I think in the end, that is not going to be as successful as a campaign on democracy. And I hope that the president broadens this in the ways Ian said, but also in the ways that our fundamental freedoms and liberties, including economic freedom and liberty, are dependent upon us having a constitutional democracy. And whether or not you believe in the freedom of choice, the freedom of kids to go to school safely, the freedom for us to be safe from the ravages of climate change, all of those freedoms and liberties we have, including the freedom and liberty to climb the economic ladder, are completely, totally dependent upon us having a constitution. I hope the president is not just giving one speech in Arizona, but we see this as a series of speeches that inspires all of us to act upon it and use it as the mode which we vote next year.
Let me ask you really quick, Matt, as being the political strategist on this panel, you know, the White House had originally thought about giving this speech in Valley Forge, George Washington's former military base in Pennsylvania, before settling on Arizona and announcing the creation of this McCain Library. Just talk to us about that moment, that McCain factor, the fact that he decided to use somebody who not only was across the aisle, somebody who actually ran against him and had some, you know, their moments of contention throughout the political debate, if you will, of that season, and using that as the backdrop to make this call.
Well, I actually think Arizona was the perfect spot to give this speech, is for a variety of reasons. One, you mentioned that John McCain, who's tried to stand independent of this. John McCain couldn't win a Republican nomination in any state, let alone in Arizona today, as he couldn't win an election as a Republican because of how far the Republicans have gone, including the idea that now Kari Lake, who's the greatest election denier in the United States, is now going to run a Senate race in the same place as John McCain. That's one. But Arizona has been in many ways one of the center states in this election denial and attacks on our democracy by the Republicans. You could put Michigan in that and Wisconsin in that, but Arizona is one of the key places where that has been fostered and the Republican Party has been so fundamentally changed. That, to me, is why picking Arizona, not only because of John McCain, but the circumstances over the last few years of where an election denialism virus has taken root, and how do we combat that in a nonpartisan way. It's not only just bipartisan, it is Democrats, Republicans, and independents can join together and say, we may disagree with each other on 100 different issues, but we all can believe in a constitutional democracy. And Arizona is where one of the key places that battle is going to be fought.